This episode of Survey Program is about the game In Stars and Time, and what it made us think about Deltarune. The first part does not contain late-game spoilers for In Stars and Time. We only talk about the first half. Then we take a break, and in part 2 we'll talk about the endgame, so if you haven't played yet, and you're not interested in hearing major spoilers for the game, you can go ahead and listen up to part 2. It also contains some adult language. You've been warned. This is your first. Is this okay? You have to apologize if this is not. Is this your first time doing a podcast with me?
It is.
Okay.
And I'll be honest, I'm a little bit nervous because
So I was spent all week nervous because you were one of the very first supporters of my last show, and so you've been with me on this ride since the very start, and so all week I've been like, oh God, like Paravalix is gonna realize that it's all just shambolic behind the scenes. That like he's gonna find out how I live. All the mystique is gonna be gone. All week I've been like, I've done such limited preparation for this podcast, and he's gonna be disappointed.
Kate, I understand. I love you. I respect you. You do not need to put on this brave.
So the problem is there was an election on Tuesday, as many listeners may know. And there was specifically an election in my city on Tuesday. And in my city, there are not a lot of people doing like extensive like number crunching, like making graphics and like keeping track of the results in the way that like the New York Times does for the New York mayoral race happens in national races. And so if I wanted data this week, I kind of just had to do it myself or with a couple people I know on Blue Sky. And so most of my free time that would have been spent thinking about the subject of today's episode was spent on looking at spreadsheets. And frantically trying to determine who would be the next mayor of Seattle, which at the time of recording, we still don't know. By the time of the release of this episode, we may know. Were there any elections where you are? You might not want to say on the show, but
I don't think it's too. I don't think it's too identifying to say that I live in California.
Yeah, there's like 9 trillion people in California. So
yeah. The only election I had to vote in myself was to whether or not to legalize gerrymandering.
Yeah, that's which had like 50% turnout over there for like just one ballot initiative about a fairly arcane political issue. People are fired up.
And it passed by like 2-1.
Yes, and also I do want to say congrats to all the people in New York on electing a mayor that doesn't suck shit. That's been historically a big challenge for you guys. So you seem to have finally gotten over the hump there.
Yeah.
And also, I'm jealous of you. I think that it's nice to be excited about something locally. All right, so luckily though, before this election happened, I did play, and like I like 95%ed it. I got almost all the achievements, but I did play an absolutely tremendous game. And a game that you recommended to me, that I've seen many people in sort of the Undertale and Deltarune community talk about, is sort of a game that's adjacent to Undertale and Deltarune. And it's a game called In Stars and Time. And it came out earlier this year, right?
No, it was in 2023.
2023, I see. All right, it came out in 2023. And it's a RPG about a time loop. And that's going to be the subject of our episode today. But here's what we're going to do, because I know that a lot of people who are listening haven't played the game. And I do think, and I'm not a huge spoilers person, but I do think it's exciting to figure out stuff about this game as you go yourself. And so we're going to divide this episode into two parts. And in part one, We're going to talk about broad strokes of the game, and we're going to talk about what it made me and you think about in terms of Undertale and Deltarune. And then in part 2, we're going to take a little break and go to part 2, which is where we're going to get into the deep spoilers. So if you haven't played the game yet, you can listen to part 1 and still get something out of this episode, and then hopefully go off and play it. And if you have played the game, you can listen all the way through, or if you don't care about spoilers, you can listen all the way through. And I'm joined today by Paravelix. How you doing, Paravelix?
Hey there. Yes, it's good to be here, and I'm happy to be on this podcast. Long-time listener, first-time guest.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. This is like a sports talk radio. I know you were a big supporter of the previous show, and I'm happy to have you on the panel here. And I'm going to start with a deeply, insanely personal question, because it's something that I felt the entire time while playing this game. Have you ever been experiencing this moment where something really nice is happening, and you're having like a really lovely time, or you're surrounded by loved ones or friends or whatever, and you get sad because you're just sitting there thinking, oh, like this good stuff that I'm experiencing now will one day be gone? Because I get that feeling so often.
God, all the time. It's difficult for me to truly. It's difficult for me to totally not take myself out of a moment and just live something as is without worrying about how it's going to be remembered in the future. How I'm going to just.
Yeah,
words are hard.
And I think that's fundamentally what this game, that is at the core of what this game is about, right? Like, you know, when you have these wonderful experiences with people that you get close to, it can be hard to put yourself fully in the moment and not get sort of, especially if you're a person who's sort of prone to anxiety, to not get sort of pulled away by the feeling that it's all very fragile. And so a lot like Undertale and Deltarune, right? This game takes, in Stars in Time, takes the sort of familiar structure of an RPG and uses it to explain the feeling of as a metaphor to explain the feeling of a story, right? And so I think it's a very strong parallel to these games in that way. And also, you know, in terms of that feeling, I was thinking about it in the context of the Chapter 4 ending in Deltarune, where Susie says, hey, Chris, can I tell you a stupid dream I have? No matter what, I want to keep being friends with you and Ralsei. When the sun comes up again, I want tomorrow to be the same as yesterday, and the next day to be just the same as that. That in the end, we can always go back to the way things were before. And it's an interesting thought, and it's a much more, I don't know, thinking about those lines, obviously part of a deeply impactful scene at the end of Chapter 4, it made me think a bit about like nostalgia in Deltarune, right? Because in modern cultural context and in games, there's been a lot of sort of back and forth about nostalgia, right? Because nostalgia can be this very asocial, like, you know, even kind of fascist feeling of like things were better before and we have to go back to the way that they are. But this approach, like the approach that this game has and the approach that you know, Susie has here in Deltarune, it's much more empathetic, right? It's much more like trying to hold on to the fragile bonds we have. And it feels like a contrast to that feeling, but it can be toxic in its own way, right? Like, you know, if Susie actually got what she wanted, if she actually got her wish here, right? Then nobody would ever grow or change, and the problems wouldn't be resolved in the world. And that's like the first thing that I thought about in the context of this game. And does that, you know, do those similarities sort of track to you between each game here?
Oh yeah, it totally tracks. Susie wants to keep hold on her experiences with Chris and Ralsei, and from our perspective, they do get to stay together forever because we can just keep replaying the game and keeping them together in that same structure, we'll always be able to revisit those times together, because to us, it is a fictional story that we can revisit at any point. And in Stars and Times, Sifrin is able to revisit their own experiences by looping over the same 2 days over and over again.
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
From the perspective of the real world, the fictional world is indeed timeless. It is that way forever. But if you can keep experiencing things in the same way, then it loses the spark of life that made it meaningful in the first place. It becomes static, unchanging, still.
Absolutely. And that's something that definitely struck me about a very similar approach to time in these two games. Like, Deltarune takes place over a couple days as well. And there is that interesting contrast between our experience with time, because from our perspective, right, Deltarune, from our perspective as people playing the game in an ongoing sense, right, Deltarune is going to take a decade. But if you play it once it's finished, it might only take a few days. Like, you might breeze through it in one extremely long sitting once it's done. And, there's that
What was that
element.
Toby quote? What was that Toby quote? Whether it takes 7 years or 7 days, and Deltarune will be waiting.
Yeah, that's the Forgotten Man. The quote from the Forgotten Man in the Chapter 3 Egg Room.
Whether it takes 11 hours or 11 years, Deltarune will be waiting.
I mean, we talked a little bit about this in a previous episode, although I can't remember which one off the top of my head. But the Forgotten Man, is sort of an author analog in a number of ways, in much the same way that the voice that speaks through the tweets is. And obviously, it's unclear whether those are all the same character and whether that might be Mr. Wingding Gaster himself. But there's that element of, this is the character who does speak through the author's voice and does speak through the game's social media accounts sometimes. And that temporal experience is kind of at the heart of Deltarune, because there's an information disconnect, right? And there's a disconnect between what we know and what the characters in the game know. And both Undertale and In Stars and Time make that disconnect diegetic in the game by having time loops as a functional element of the game, right? And so Deltarune hasn't done that yet. But in Undertale is a time loop game, right? As you experience it, to get the true ending in Undertale, you have to replay the game. You have to go back and reload a save and proceed diegetically with the new knowledge that you have, right? And some characters in the game display awareness of that. And that's one of the most fascinating elements of Undertale, like metatextually. And In Stars and Time takes that to an extreme and says, really asks the question in the same way that Undertale asked the question, what if these RPG mechanics around combat and experience that we take for granted had like real, interpersonal stakes? Like, what if people reacted realistically to being in a world with those rules? In Stars and Time asks, what if you had the protagonist, the player character, experiencing this drift, this disconnect away from having the same temporal experience as the other members of their party. And if you haven't played, we're going to be referring to Sifrin as both he and they throughout the game. That's canonical. Those are canonical. That's a canonical he they.
Yeah, the other characters switch which pronoun they use for Sifrin basically every other sentence.
Yeah.
I want people to refer to me like that. I want what Sifrin has.
Yes, well, and I think they do, and so so that's first off, that's super exciting. I love that. I actually don't know that I've seen a game quite of this scope with a character that used multiple pronouns before, and so that was exciting to see. I really appreciated that. That was one of those first things where I played this game and I was like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
And so the gulf sort of widens, and again, we're in part 1, we're not going to get into deep spoilers, so we're not going to do anything, we're not going to talk about anything past Act 3 in this part. And Act 3 is like sort of the bulk of the middle game. But I would say, that was the thing that first drew me to this game, was that realization that, it's a narrative story with very real feeling characters, but as you continue to play, as you continue to die and loop back, there's this growing gulf between Sifrin and the other members of the party.
Yeah, he starts to see his party like we see them, as from the perspective of player, as seeing them as fictional characters acting out this play that they find themselves as both star and director of, as Loop says.
Yeah, and there's this constant sort of theater motif with Sifrin. Sifrin is a fan of plays, of theater, and begins to interpret their experiences through that lens. And, those time loop elements that are shared between Instars and Time and Undertale, they definitely did make me think about that temporal connection, because there's only been a limited awareness of time by the characters in the story. But there was something that sort of twinged me when I played Deltarune, right? When I played these new chapters of Deltarune. And it was Ralsei seemingly forgetting the amount of time since seeing the party before. When you go back to the castle town in chapter 4, right? It feels like it's been a while to him, and he has to be reminded that it's only been a day. And I had to, I sort of pinned that in my head as being being something that's potentially very interesting to think about. Because, and this is sort of pure theorization, but I do wonder if Ralsei might have a different relationship to the day-by-day time of Deltarune than the other characters. And I think that's a good jumping off point to talk about some of the many similarities between Ralsei and Sifrin, and what playing this game and understanding Sifrin might tell us about Ralsei.
Oh god, yeah, there's... It's as you put in the outline, Sifrin is basically like if Ralsei went sicko mode.
Yeah. Obviously the visual comparisons are there, right? With the big pointy hat that they use to cover themselves.
And they even dress the same. Whenever I see Sifrin rendered in color in ISAT fan art, I sometimes wonder why his robe isn't green, because I always sort of mentally parse it as green.
Yeah. Well, what's color? I'm not sure I understand what you mean. So the game, by the way, very striking visual style in Instars and Time. It's all in black and white. And that is also a diegetic element of the setting. There are no colors in the game setting. And we'll talk a little. I want to talk a little bit about that in part 2 as well. We do have. All right, that's already on the outline. You beat me to it. Congrats. But I do want to talk a little about that part 2. So just keep that in mind, that it's black and white, and there's that really distinctive, limited color palette there. But it's true. It's like they just look so similar, and so obviously it does make you immediately think about their comparisons. But there's more than that, right? You identified several more items of similarity between Ralsei and Sifrin.
Yeah, both of these characters, despite the fact that their friends clearly love them, clearly see them as integral parts of the team, they tend to think about themselves and talk about themselves, even to their friends, like they're just disposable background objects. Like it's fine if their friends leave them behind and go on to bigger and better things that they should clearly be doing instead. That they enjoy their time with their friends, but ultimately that's not what matters or should matter. Just leave us behind, leave us to be these sad Omelas kids.
Yeah, and exactly, and they see their role as sort of, absorbing punishment or absorbing meaninglessness for the benefit of the actually meaningful people that they're surrounded by.
Exactly. That was what I was trying to say, but smarter. Thank you.
This is 99% of the time I'm the one saying things I'm summarizing things in a dumb way, so that's that's my job as host. But early on in the game, you meet a character called Loop, who seems to have some mysterious level of knowledge of the circumstances, and refers to the other characters in the party by their titles only. And the researcher, the kid, And I immediately, when I saw that, my mind immediately went to the chapter, the Deltarune's prophecy panels in chapter 4 of thinking about like, how these characters were dehumanized and referred to only by their role in the story, right? They're taken out of their humanity and put into these specific siloed roles.
The girl, the hero, the
cage with human soul and parts.
The pointy-headed kid.
Yeah. Toothpaste boy.
Toothpaste boy.
And there's a prologue to this game, right? I think we can talk about the prologue to this game. So this game, sort of like Chapter 1 had its own independent release before Deltarune was finished, and just like Deltarune had a demo, there was a separate prologue to In Stars and Time, which is sort of it's a parallel story, and it had a sort of a similar thing with titles, right? I actually didn't get to play the prologue. I read up on it before this episode.
Yeah, the prologue is called Start Again, Start Again, Start Again, a prologue. Often shortened to just Start Again, a prologue, because that's a very unwieldy name to speak all the time. And in that version, it's a similar case. It's like a more condensed version of the party's journey through the House of Change, which is basically the dungeon that they spend the bulk of the game exploring. And in that version, Sifrin has already been looping countless times instead of joining them on the first day of his journey, like we do in the final game, we jump into it very far downstream. And by that point, he's gotten so inured to the loops that he has entirely forgotten the names of their party members. They just see them as the researcher, the Hound Maiden, the fighter, and the kid.
Yeah.
And they probably would have forgotten their own name too, had they and just thought of themselves as the Traveler, had everyone not kept saying it to them.
Yeah. The setting of this is such a fully realized setting, but I think one of my favorite things about it is it actually reminds me a little bit of Disco Elysium, where it's this very fully thought through setting in fictional world, but you only get a little glimpse of it. It doesn't ever fully, you don't get this full lore explanation of where all the places are in the world. And like Disco Elysium, there's several parallels between the different countries and places and cultures in this world and our own, but it's still clearly fictional and fantastical.
Martinez and Revachol are inspired by this hybrid French-English countryside, and in Stars in Time, Kabwe is based vaguely on Japan, Volgard is based vaguely on France, but there's a lot of off-screen that we don't know about because it's not relevant to the story. Yeah. And
I always love those games that are getting a little glimpse of a bigger world. But there's also, you mentioned there's several similarities in the settings between, Deltarune and In Stars and Time. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, sure. So one of the things that struck me about both In Stars and Time's Society of Volgard and Deltarune's Society of Hometown that we see is that ostensibly on the surface, they're very progressive about gender and how people are able to express themselves, and yet they're surprisingly normative about romantic relationships at the same time. We see a lot of trans NPCs in Hometown, and Chris himself goes by they, them pronouns, of course, and no one has a problem with that, but they're still pressured into this heteronormative relationship with Noelle by their respective parents, and of course
there's still also sort of Toriel's sort of alluded to sort of past conservatism about Azriel engaging in romantic relationships at all.
Yeah, exactly.
And also their sort of her sort of fear of the kids seeing inappropriate things on the television and putting parental locks on. It's not that progressive, right?
Yeah. And the Society of Volgard in Stars and Time in Stars in Time is focused on the change belief, a religion based around worship of the change god, who is this, and worship involves changing yourself and changing your identity every so often. And in Bogart society, it's expected even that you will radically reshape your identity one or more times over the course of your life. So it's to the point that one of the characters struggles with her attachment to the change belief because she feels better in the body that she was born with than one that she might change into instead. It's a
world in which trans is the majority and cis people are oppressed.
Exactly. Yes. And yet, even in that world, that same character feels pressure to engage in romantic relationships in the conventional sense, find someone, love them in this very specific way, as she says. And there's this still pressure to perform romance correctly.
Yeah, and early on, there's this very funny interaction where you learn about one of the customs of this region is about like giving earrings to your partners. When you basically the equivalent of marriage when you bond with them, and Sifrin, who's a foreigner in this country, right, points out that everyone in the party is wearing earrings, and is like, "Hey, is that connected?" And they all immediately have to evaluate for the very first time, like whether they've sort of been like prepared for this normative life, like just through their style choices. It's such a funny scene. I love that scene so much.
Yeah, that's great.
So I just think it's such a cool and interesting setting where you're constantly trying to find out more, and that's the sort of thing where another similarity with Undertale and Deltarune, where you really do want to click on everything and read all the flavor text because it's fun to find out new information about this world that you're in, and it's also interesting because you learn these things and you have these conversations. But then as you progress through the loops, they become old hat, they become old knowledge, and you start both literally, as the player and like mechanically in the game zoning out for these discussions in the future, right? What was once exciting and new for you to find out just becomes another checkbox you need to check, another conversation you need to have on your way through the loop.
And uniquely, in Stars in Time features a way to literally fast forward the dialogue. You can hold down a button to speed through it, and at the frame of one text box per frame.
Yeah,
as Sifrin zones out.
Yeah, and I just think I think it's such an interesting mechanic to like have that. I don't know. It's exciting. I think it's so interesting to have that sort of ludonarrative assonance. I know some people say ludonarrative harmony, but we don't get to say assonance enough in our society. So I think I like saying assonance.
It's a great word. It's an assonant word.
It's great, but you have that really that exciting sort of. It's fun when the game mechanics overlap with how you're feeling, and the way that the loops progress in this game definitely feels that way. And I think if we want to talk more about how loops go as we progress, I'd say we're about at the halfway point here. So we could take a little break, listen to an excellent song from the In Stars in Time soundtrack, and meet you on the other side, refreshed, renewed, and ready to talk about deep spoilers.
Sounds good to me. I'll go make another cup of tea.
Welcome back through the magic of radio. We've taken a break, and just like in the gap between chapters in Deltarune, you don't know how long it's been for us. We could be recording this.
5 seconds.
We could be recording it. You're ruining the magic. We could be recording this on a whole separate day. No, it's been 5 seconds for us. And so it's spoiler time. Let's go to Spoiler City where the grass is monochrome and the Isabeau is pretty.
That works actually.
Yeah. But this is the choice between the age and beauty alliance was very funny.
Yes.
So let's sort of unleash ourselves to talk about some of the more, you know, deep stuff in this game. So if you haven't played and you're still listening, you don't care about spoilers, okay. And so that mechanical, to pick up where we left off, like that mechanical thing where you feel like you're getting like tired of the loops as they go on. So is Siffrin, right? Siffrin starts to become increasingly detached and cynical and going through the motions. And I was so compelled by this, like, you know, their light and optimism gone. And I was so compelled by this as it continues to progress and things start seeming more and more hopeless.
The light literally drains from their eyes. Their pictures, their sprites become much more dark and jaded and such too.
Yeah. It's really interesting, and I think in particular, you know, the first few times through, right, I was thinking every time of like, okay, I want to be nice to all the kids in town. I want to solve everybody's problems. You know, I want to get the earring for the person looking for their partner, right? And
yeah, as
you start to progress and you get through the game, you start to care less and less about that. You realize, okay, I'm just going to go through another loop anyway. And I think one of the really exciting and fun, one of the very last like sort of surprises that the game threw at me was throughout this entire thing. I was thinking, okay, I'm just going to keep looping. And then at the very end, I'm going to do one loop where I do everything, right? And it all goes perfectly. And that's going to be the one that I keep, right? Like that's going to be the final one. And it turns out you can't do that at all, right? The final loop is not one where everything goes right. Like Siffrin has the same idea and it all goes wrong.
Terribly wrong. Siffrin Siffrin eventually, through this combination of hopelessness and mania, decides to beat the king themselves as fast as possible and tries to make sure that everything goes optimally as fast as possible. And so they try to just speed run these emotional, heartfelt conversations that they had with his party members before. And it goes terribly because as it as it turns out, you can't speed run these emotional moments because it's not organic, it's not real anymore. Siffrin has stopped seeing his friends as people.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just approaching it like a speedrunner. Like, I have to just optimize all of this. I'm totally impatient with everybody. I've seen the way to all of these people's hearts. And also, at this point, they're also starting to think of themselves negatively, right? They're starting to think of themselves as manipulative, as, you know, as everyone's obviously only been nice to me in previous loops because I've figured out the secrets, you know, because I've manipulated them into acting this way. It's an inability, sort of a Ralsei-like inability to internalize that people might love them.
Yeah. and the most frustrating thing about it is that it has a ring of truth because Siffrin does know the exact right buttons to push to make people like them and make them and guide them on this journey of self-discovery that they have. They figured out the optimal dialogue buttons to push in this JRPG they call life.
Well, and you get to see the consequences play out, and you say this, and you talk about, you know, flowification of Siffrin as you proceed through the game. And you're right, this is a very similar, you know, character who's in a loop and initially tries to act in this, you know, in this optimal way, and it just ends up sort of spiraling, right?
Absolutely. I was reminded a lot about Flowey's story in the No Mercy route related to Chara as they advance through the new home, of how they woke up in this, woke up in the garden and found themselves able to Sorry, I forgot that Flowey uses he, him pronouns. Flowey found himself able to reload his own save whenever something went wrong, whenever he made someone sad or didn't say the right things to the people that he used to care about.
Yeah.
And was able to find the optimal path and speedrun speedrun their friendships.
Absolutely. And like, starting to see the people, he starts to see the people in his life as toys, as archetypes, as characters to play with, right? As, people who have fun dialogue or not fun dialogue, or, those to be avoided.
What was once a joy becomes an amusement.
Yeah. There's another parallel with Undertale, right? Where I think you sort of get, or with Deltarune in this case, where you sort of get trained into thinking by these types of games, by these types of narrative RPGs, that obviously every villain has to be able to be reasoned with, right? And I guess we should say, we haven't mentioned even the core antagonist of this game. Speaking of a perspective on nostalgia that can become toxic, right? And speaking of a perspective of wanting to hold on to what you have while you have it, is there's this character, and I'm glad we left this for the second half because I think everything about the country is great to discover, as you play. But there's the antagonist is the king, this mysterious figure who appeared in Dormont and, began to freeze time and freeze the whole country in time. And his motivations for this, you don't initially know. You don't initially understand why he's trying to do this, but you come to discover that, he was basically a refugee from a country, a mysterious country to the north that has basically been obliterated from everybody's memories, right? Nobody can remember it. Nobody can remember the language. Trying to speak its name causes you physical harm. Trying to read the language gives you a headache. And the people who are from that country have forgotten everything about their past. But, the country has been... So the country's been, pushed away, right? Yeah. But then, and so they found this place and this new place that took them in, and it's full of love, and it's, and despite some of the limitations we talked about, it is a progressive place that's welcoming and kind. And they didn't want the same fate to befall the king. He didn't want the same fate to befall this country, and so he elected to preserve it forever in amber, right? And so nothing bad would ever happen to this wonderful place. He wants to freeze it forever. And as you play the game more, you discover that Siffrin is also from this country, right? And so there's a clear parallel between the king and Siffrin in this way. And so as you discover these connections, you start to think, well, obviously we can empathize with the king, right? Obviously we can connect.
Yeah, they're two people from the same country. They both lost everything. They both found something new to hold on to in Bogard. Maybe they can come together to find common ground.
Yeah, and so as you move through the game, you get the opportunity to try to talk to the king during the boss fight at the end of every loop. And initially, this does seem to be going well, right?
Yeah. It seems like we're breaking through to him, and we're getting a clear insight on his motivations. They're not that different from Siffrin's, which in retrospect should have been some sort of flag. But eventually Siffrin asks the king, "Hey, let's stop fighting. We can find a way to preserve Vogard in a different way." And it looks for all the world like the king is going to say yes. And like he's going to agree. Maybe there's a way to end this peacefully. No one needs to fight. No one needs to die. We can find a solution that works for everyone. And it's
very similar to Deltarune Chapter 1, to, interacting with King and thinking, okay, this must be like Asgore. There must be another way.
Yeah. And then there isn't. Truly heart-wrenching scene that Siffrin is scarred by, and I was kind of scarred by too, honestly.
Yes, it's very scary. And this whole game, you have a little kid following your party around, a very charming little kid, Bonnie, and they're never directly in peril until this moment, and it's such a terrifying turn on the fact that kids don't get hurt in games, right? Like that's just one of the rules of games in general.
Yeah. And it was one of the rules of this game until this moment. Yeah. Even if your party died, Bonnie would always escape, and King shows how serious he is by causing direct harm to Bonnie in this way. And it's
very similar to the initial chapter 1 feeling of King imperiling Lancer in chapter 1, right? Obviously later on we learn that Lancer would have been fine, but like in that initial moment you think, oh, this guy's fucked up, he's gonna kill his own kid.
Yeah. He baited us into thinking that he was an Undertale villain.
Yes, exactly. And so taking advantage of that empathy, and it changes the calculus. It changes the moral calculus moving forward. And from that moment on, that's really what breaks Sifrin into no longer being an optimist about finding a way out of this, and starting to become, even more cynical than ever, and being completely rattled and struggling to hold on. And that's really the pivot point where the game moves to the end. And I was thinking about this early on too, on this point here, but the color, right? We talked about the monochrome color of the game, and it's diegetic. And as you proceed through the house, you realize when you're reading items and, you're reading books that there used to be color in this world, and it's all gone. And between that and the country, there's this really profound, precarious sense in this setting that things are being lost, and the characters don't even really realize it.
And I don't think I've mentioned this yet, but when Sifrin and the King try to remember the name of the country, try to bring it back, the screen looks like it's breaking, and it flashes red.
Yeah.
In a game where there had only ever been black and white before.
Yeah.
It's something forgotten on the other side is trying to break through, and you can almost grasp it, but you can't. The more you try it, the more it slips through your fingers.
And you made a point of similarity with how color is used in the Dark Worlds in Deltarune.
Yeah, and honestly, I'm not sure it's a point that I can articulate beyond the surface level similarities of how the Dark World's colors are much more vivid and perhaps what we might call unnatural than the Light World's. It's much more saturated and leaps out. Like Chris's blue is the best way I can think.
Yeah, and character, and like Leitner's character portraits are monochrome, but characters from the Dark World have color portraits, right? In the in their dialogue boxes, and the whole color scheme of the world changes, and it's tinted, and it's changed, and it's inverted by the darkness in a lot of ways.
It's more fantastical, but at the same time, it's also more real than reality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I definitely think there's something there, to be analyzed about the way that a limited color palette opens up. And obviously, look, because I am the person that I am, I do have to say, I did think about when you watch something that's black and white and you get one climactic flash of red. I did think about Battleship Potemkin. I have to say it. It's that's the most stereotypical me thing to say. But I did think about
seen Battleship Potemkin. I need to see it someday.
Yeah, it's great. I saw it at the Seattle Symphony with the symphony playing an orchestral score for the film, which is a great way to watch a silent film. But Battleship Potemkin, it's black and white the whole way through. But at the very end, when the red flag is raised, the hand painted the film to be red for the flag to be red in that file. Yeah, and so I definitely did think about that, and I'm sorry, I know that's so stereotypical of me to have thought about that, but I did, because black and white with with a climactic flash of red is just immediately what my mind went to. And
wow, yeah, I can absolutely see it.
Yeah, and so. You also mentioned here, I guess also, I don't know, I'm sure some people have made this comparison before, but it's so, like, high film versus low film, but I did think about the film adaptation of Sin City, the Robert Rodriguez Sin City film, which is also black and white with some red accents every once in a while. Actually, surprisingly,
Also have not seen.
well, that one's less. You don't need to go out of your way to go watch Sin City, but it's all right. Fucking, if you want to go, it's got a good Elijah Wood performance in it. But just some initial thoughts that I had about the color scheme there, and more about the country. You also drew another parallel line that I hadn't thought of at all with the country and Undertale and Deltarune.
Yeah, so the country is this forgotten home that the characters feel an inexorable longing to return to, something that they want to reclaim that has been forever lost. No one can remember anything about it. No one can understand, even if we told them what was going on. And the only thing we can do is try to not forget, try to keep everything that was once belonged to the people from that land in their own memory, even if it's not something that can ever be shared.
Yeah.
And remind you of any one we might know in Undertale? The place where it's raining.
There's another element of, we talked about this a little bit last episode, but the repeated insistence in the marketing around Deltarune that there's only one ending. There's this constant struggle against that one ending about, the talking to the head housemating and the story looping back. This is a game about trying to find a way out. And that does remind me of what The Voice says in the, so it said in the tweets around Deltarune's release of like, we're trying to find, trying to make a new ending with you, right? Try to make a better future. And it does feel like we're coming to a point with Deltarune of trying to struggle against the prophecy, trying to struggle against that one ending that I think this game can be sort of, can sort of cast a light on and allow us to analyze through that lens.
Yeah, because Cyprian keeps trying to find a way to break the time loop and tries everything that they can think of. And no matter what happens, even if you make friends with everybody, even if you do everything right, it always it loops back the same way. There's no avoiding the fact that it's all over when you talk to the head housemaiden. It's eventually you'll beat the king, you'll say goodbye to your friends, and then time will start again. No matter what you do. But that doesn't mean that what you did along the way was meaningless. If you want it to be meaningful, it can be. The friendships that Cyprian made are still real, even if only they can remember them.
Absolutely. And if you give up on that, if you decide it's futile, I mean, you end up with the very final realization, right? I think the last thing, the sort of the final secret in this game that you find out is who Loop is. And you discover later on, although I had my suspicions early on, I think, you discover who Loop is. And do you want to tell me a bit about that?
Yep. So we mentioned Start Again, a prologue, and how there was a Cyprian who had long since given up and was only going through the motions and had forgotten entirely who his party members were named. That Cyprian becomes, from the prologue, becomes the loop of this game. They gave up on their wish and made a second wish to be anywhere else, and found themselves in Stars in Time as this guiding voice, the producer of the play, rather than its director or the star.
Yeah.
And ironically became a literal star.
Yeah.
Doing so.
And there's and I don't know, it's so interesting that, the fact that speaking of Ralsei parallels, here's another Asriel parallel for you, right?
Yeah. In the end, Loop is the only one who doesn't really get a happy ending. They see this person whose shoes they should be filling go out and into the world with his perfect ending, with his friends and family members, and see the ending that they should have had. They are left behind forever under the favor tree or wherever else we think their journey leads them. And
Yeah, it's ambiguous for sure.
yeah, and it's like what happens to Flowey at the end of Undertale. Asriel doesn't get to keep his soul or empathy or the connections that he wants to have with the people he loves. He turns back into the flower and stays in the underground, maybe, with everyone else. Everyone else goes to the surface.
Before somebody gets mad at me, there is the alarm clock dialogue that implies that Flowey does go to the surface, right? That, you know, they continue to sort of interact with everybody at a distance.
Yeah.
And so it's not quite completely hopeless, right? And I think that ending for Loop as well, it's ambiguous, right? It's ambiguous what happens from then on.
Yeah. Yeah. Loop even asks Sifrin if what happens to them afterward matters, and you can have Sifrin reply either way.
Yeah. And I think that's one of my favorite things about this game is that it leaves a lot to you, right? And obviously, you know, people have cared about Undertale for 10 years now, because of the way that its ending opens up into new possibilities and new worlds, and people care about Deltarune as an ongoing story, but will continue to care about it after it ends. But In Stars and Time really manages to, you know, leave its hooks in you because of how ambiguous it is, because of how much about its setting it doesn't tell you, because of how much about its future it leaves to you, and how much about its mechanics it doesn't explain. And I always prefer that approach in fiction to just like dumping everything out, you know, to trying to close every loop, to trying to close every, you know, every bit of understanding. I love having a jumping off point for deeper understanding.
Yeah, definitely. I like it when works end with an ellipsis, but not a period.
And I'm really glad I played this game at your recommendation. I do think it's a game that clarified a lot of my thoughts about like the temporal relationship in Deltarune and Undertale. Just a super fun game. You know, I've mentioned before on the show that I don't usually love grinding in games, but the sort of the like diegetic element in this made it really much more interesting to me, and I never thought it got too tedious.
Yeah. I'm so glad you played this game. I'm so glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's an awesome game. I highly recommend it. Its regular price is like $20. I think it's on sale until November 15th. So when the show comes out, it will still be on sale for $13.99 on Steam.
Speaking of Steam, I guess I have one amusing anecdote to share about how the creator saw my Steam review. So when I review games on Steam, I try to be a silly little guy, and I like my review of Outer Wilds was it's like if Spore was good. My review of Off was always a great game, but now it's finally a good one. My review of BioShock is as fast as all as the moral choices are. I cannot help but respect the game so thoroughly dedicated to taking the piss out of Ayn Rand, and I also left a similarly quippy review of In Stars and Time, and the creator Adrienne saw it and posted it on her Blue Sky and said, and captioned it "Review of In Stars and Time that killed me instantly." And below it was a screenshot of me saying, "You almost can't tell that the author has read Homestuck." I know I'm breaking the cardinal rule of the show by not doing the.
You're gonna get bleeped. It's the country that everyone has forgotten on this podcast. Thanks for listening, everybody. That's survey program. And if you do play In Stars and Time and like it, you can go wishlist Adrian Bazir's next game. It's Truth Scrapper. It's release date TBA, but you can wishlist it now on Steam. And thanks so much for coming on, Paravelix. I really appreciate it. I had a ton of fun.
My pleasure.
And
my pleasure. This was great.
Yeah, I look forward to having you on in the future. I'll talk in the prologue about us going to every other week. People know there wasn't an episode last week. But obviously we'll break that rule if we get some emergency. If there's like a newsletter that comes out or something, we'll do a quick emergency pod to talk about it in an off week. But yeah, it's a great time. Go play In Stars and Time. I can't play every game people recommend to me, but keep recommending interesting games that make you think stuff in the space. And have a great time, everybody. Is there anything you want to plug, Paravelix?
Thank you for asking. No.
All right, nothing to plug.
I don't think there is. At some point, my friend Sagelights is organizing a dub of In Stars and Time, in which I am going to play the king, because and whenever that materializes, I'll talk about it in the survey program Discord.
All right, exciting. So yeah, I'll mention this in the outro again, but yeah, join the survey program Discord for discussion of the show, discussion of Deltarune, swapping fan art that we like, and, presumably, I would assume it's going to get crazy when Chapter 5 gets close to coming out. So, get in on the ground floor, everybody.
Yeah.
See you, everybody. Have a good week.
Bye.
If you'd like to support the show and get access to one bonus episode a month, you can join the Green Room at groupofshrike.net or the link in the description. Our next bonus episode, the second, will be coming out next week. I'm really excited about that. As mentioned in the outro, you can join the Discord for more talk. You can follow us on Apple Music, Spotify, YouTube Music, wherever you get your podcasts. And I always appreciate comments or reviews on any of those platforms, though the easiest way to reach me is going to be on the Discord server. Thanks so much for listening. See you in 2 weeks for.
All right. This is your first. Is this okay? You have to apologize if this is not. Is this your first time doing a podcast with me?
It is.
Okay.
And I'll be honest, I'm a little bit nervous because I've never...
So I was spent all week nervous because you were one of the very first supporters of my last show, and so you've been with me on this ride since the very start, and so all week I've been like, oh God, like Paravelix is gonna realize that it's all just shambolic behind the scenes.
Group Shrike Amalgamated General Productions GmbH